They were the heroes from the future, teenagers protecting the universe from those that would sow the seeds of chaos. Each had unique powers and abilities, and though they often had their differences, they came together to save the day as the Legion of Superheroes. Now you can be a part of their adventures and learn the history of the future in the Legion Clubhouse.
This week on the Legion Clubhouse, we check out some underutilized Legionnaires. Yeah, it's going to happen.
Oh, and we also meet the other superhero team in the galaxy.
Yeah, they've been around for a while. First appearance. Let's find out what happens.
Adventure Comics number 374, Mission Diabolical. Published November 1968. Written by Jim Shooter with art by Win Mortimer from Shooter Layouts. An interstellar gang war engulfs the entire Legion.
So we have really two very different issues to look at this week, Matthew. First, Adventure Comics 374, Mission Diabolical. And have you ever heard of Diabolique?
Yeah.
This is an Italian comic? Mm-hmm. About a super spy who goes undercover,
right? And
he can mimic like anyone. He puts on these crazy masks and he looks like a whole bunch of different people.
Rubber masks, and it's kind of like James Bond, except a lot more stabby, and he has this cool black mask.
I don't think I have ever read any Diabolique comic books, nor have I ever seen the movie, which I don't think it's based on the comic, or maybe it is, and it's just not really well done.
I've only seen the movie in Mystery Science Theater.
Yeah, I know that's the one. But I wonder if the title of this week's issue didn't come from that. Mission Diabolical, where we find some of the Legion members going undercover and taking on the persona of other people.
Gangsters, y'all, gangsters.
It's really interesting. So I didn't know if there may be a Diabolique kind of influence here. I mean, the series ran from, I want to say, 1962. So I don't know if Jim Shooter is able to get Italian comics in the United States, but we're 6 years in and maybe something's floated his way.
Danger Diabolique, the movie, came out in 68. It was released in 1968, January of 68, which means that since this is an issue that came out in November, it could be something that was, in the metaphorical water for Jim.
Yeah, it's very interesting whenever we look at, especially the Shooter era, because we don't see it so much with any of the other creators because they're just like pulling stuff out of their hats and figuring out what's going on. It really feels like Jim Shooter, when he's writing these things, is tapping into shows that he's seen or movies that he's seen or something that he's doing at a science project at school at the time. And it
feels like he wears his influences on his sleeve a lot more, which I'm actually sort of fine with it. I feel like that's part of the reason that this is such a well-regarded Legion era, is because it's something that, it feels like, hey, it would be great. What if we did X, Y, and Z? And, only a 15-year-old kid could write it that way. So we did.
Yeah. This is a very different Legion roll call because of the secret mission where we get a splash page that has Ultra Boy and Element Lad and Dream Girl and Supergirl and Matter Eater Lad. And it reveals their real names and their current positions and their home planets and all these things. And we see this mysterious hand saying, I'm going to make them perform a mission diabolical.
Dun, 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 dun,
I'm going to make them perform I'm going to make them perform a mission diabolical, as opposed to I'm going to make them perform a mission diabolical.
Or a diabolical mission.
Yeah.
It's the colon that makes all the difference.
Yeah, it really does. Let me tell you. Mm-hmm. This also starts out with a look at the Legion outside of their Legion duties on the set of a big major motion picture.
Yeah, and it starts with the unusual pairing of Colossal Boy and Shrinking Violet, who, metaphorically speaking, in terms of, powers and abilities, make perfect sense as a team, but we almost never see them together.
Right.
And, way down the line, they play off of that big, small thing. We'll get to that in the 70s, but... Yeah,
this is Giant Man and the Wasp.
Well, yeah, sort of, kind of, except it's Colossal Boy and the Shrinking Wasp.
Right.
And of course, it ends with them captured by some sort of weird alien monster spitting, I don't know, caterpillar guts at them.
Yeah, the special effects in this movie look really great. Wait a minute, that's not special effects. Someone has kidnapped us.
Oh, no. And then 6 more Legionnaires are stolen when they're trying to stop a robbery.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that's really fascinating is that it's not a low-power team. You've got your Star Boy, and you've got 2 Founders and Sun Boy, and you've got Shadow Lass and Light Lass. I mean, it's not, a heavy hitter squadron. It's certainly not Superboy, Mon-El, and Ultra Boy palling around, but those 6 heroes should be able to handle a whole lot of situations.
Well, and I'm curious what this blinding light is that suddenly drained all their power, because they're blinded and then their powers are gone, and then suddenly they're being shot in the head by these flying frogmen.
You know what that is?
What is that?
That's what you call your unobtainium.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, unobtainium. It has that power to do things.
Yeah, so this is just a little MacGuffin thing.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we get the most fascinating thing of all, where the 2 Legion psychics are somehow forced to fight each other to their metaphorical doom, and it turns into a slugfest between Saturn Girl and Princess Projectra.
They're like, oh, we're supposed to be here on our dates. Oh, our boys didn't show up. Why don't we go through the tunnel of love? Yeah.
Okay, we'll go through the tunnel of love together. Oh, wait, now I hate you. But I really enjoy the fact that you get a flat-out punch fest out of this. Because even in 68, even in the Legion, which, having more female characters can be a little bit more permissive with stuff like that, having them just slug it out and knock each other out, essentially, in a fist fight, that still feels kind of progressive, especially, for DC at the time when, even Supergirl wasn't allowed to fight male heroes very often.
Oh, yeah. And then we see Brainiac 5 and Bouncing Boy and Duo Damsel also get all taken out down at the harbor. And then the heavy hitters also get taken out by space pirates, or are they Zardoz? Because, man, they're wearing these little singlets. Or
they look like Sean Connery, don't they?
It's really uncomfortable, especially when in that one panel where Karate Kid is punching one of them out, and it's like, oh boy.
The gun is good.
But I will say this is also the return of the manganium. I call it Mangina Ineron Depot.
Manganium inertron, which nothing can break through.
Not even, how do you mold it? How do you work with this manganium inertron?
It must be like adamantium. It must be liquid until it hardens, and once it hardens, it can no longer be worked with.
Can you remelt it? Can you remelt it?
Not adamantium. Presumably, a neutron would be difficult to melt, since, Superboy can't burn his way out with his laser blazer phaser vision.
Well, he says, I can't even crack this wall. This wall so hard. This wall is so, I cannot understand this wall. I can't crack it.
How wall is it?
Yeah. And then we get the remaining Legionnaires, which is, who do we got here? We got Colossal Boy. We got Matter Eater Lad.
Ultra Boy,
Matter Eater Lad. Dream Girl. Element Lad.
And Supergirl.
Yes. And
it's an interesting squad.
Yeah. They go back to their headquarters and there's a giant floating head.
Yeah, they literally walk in and Julie Schwartz says, I represent Scorpius. And they are now being captured. And if they do anything, all of their captured pals will be killed to death.
Mm-hmm.
So this underutilized squad, I don't think we've seen Matter Eater Lad in 15 issues, but this underutilized squad, including the team leader, who somehow is still at this point a little bit underutilized, all get teleported to the secret home of the Scorpius cartel.
And there they get to meet some pretty bad dudes. We get to meet Rogarth, Black Mace, Mistelor, Quanto,
Flibbit,
and my favorite,
Scodger.
Shagrak. I'm Shagrak. I'm Shagrak. Also, again, Matthew, we also get to see Cobra Commander again in his hood over the face, or is it the Monster Society or whatever the Red Hood Batman villain was before Red Hood came about?
He was the Red Hood.
Yeah, it is really weird to just that pops up, and those are the first two things that pop in my head. Once again, Cobra Commander, which we talked about in a previous episode, that Shooter had some involvement in, and then kind of a character that looks like an old Batman villain.
The thing that I really love, though, about this is the Taurus gang is one guy with a name that means anything, and then guys who are just like, "Duh, what? My name is Heartblit."
Yeah.
And this is Snarfblat of planet Harfenplibble.
I'm Shagrath.
I'm Shagrath.
Shagrath is kind of creepy because he's got this mad love for Mr. Lore.
Right.
And she's just like, oh my God, this thing is the creepiest guy ever. Get away from me. Get away from me. Get him away from me. And he's like, me love you long time, lady.
It's just awful. And then, of course, we get the wonderful sequence of these 5 weirdos getting trashed by 5 people in street clothes.
Okay, so before we get any further into this, this issue, do you think Jim Shooter really wrote this issue?
I got to tell you, this is not good. I mean,
no, I was going to say just the opposite. I thought it was really good. The words in this, the structure and the wording of this issue is really, really different than what we've seen from Shooter before. Yeah. And this issue really feels like a different writer completely, or that, Shooter has been whipped by Mort Weisinger so many times that he's just freaked out about trying something new, that this is what's going on. Because, yeah, some of it is really weird and uncomfortable, like I said, with Shagrath going on to Mr. Lore about how much he's going to love her and take care of her, and she's just like, oh, creepy. He goes, Mr. Lore failed, 355, but Shagrath forgive. Nice, Mr. Lore.
Stop it.
No, it's really creepy.
It is. And the dialogue in this issue just feels really leaden to me. I don't know. I wouldn't say that it's not Shooter. I would say that if we take it on face value that this is a Jim Shooter story and Jim Shooter dialogue, you have to realize that we're dealing with a very young writer who's still coming into their craft, and that he can vary wildly in how strong the issue comes together, because there are some real stinkers as far as dialogue in this issue. But
at the same time, we can go into the very next issue and it feels like Shooter again. This really, if you read all of the narration, all the narrator boxes in the old Ted Knight voice, the time, the 30th century, the place, Solar Studios.
In a nearby storage building.
Yeah, and then there's also soon in the cerebrotechnic maze of stimuli chambers. It's just like, what? And this is just, I really don't know if Shooter wrote this.
I think he did, because, it has the makings of a Shooter story where we have some sort of contrivance to bring together the team that they specifically want. And it has that Shooter thing of even Superboy, even Mon-El can be, punked out for, the point of this particular story. It feels shootery to me in terms of the focus on these weird hidden secret societies and this existing history that we've never seen before. It feels like something of a piece with the other stories. But I do agree with you. It feels like there may be a heavier editing arm, or maybe, somebody else kind of co-plotting or something. But yeah, it's definitely an odd issue.
I didn't hate it. I'll say that. I did not hate this, because this is a done-in-one story. We get to see everything that happens. We get to see, this vast underworld of criminal activity that's going on around the universe. And then we get to see the Legionnaires in some, quote unquote, civilian costumes or disguise costumes.
Right.
Which I kind of like.
Matter Eater Lad's civilian clothes are actually better than his costume.
Yeah. It's so interesting to see this and how different it is. And we also get introduced to the new head of the science police. And new guy we've never met before.
But he's clearly, he's Chief Zoltaurus of the Science Police, so he's clearly an authority figure. We should not question him.
Same way with the head of the Scorpius gang, where he's like, I'm not the one in charge. You've never met me. The big boss is out doing something else. You see? Yeah. And we're just supposed to listen to this guy and believe everything he says. But then we get into, again, going back to Diabolique, the Ultra Boy puts on a real-life mask and has to imitate Black Mace so that when they do their big fight, a second fight where they meet up with these guys at a gambling casino in outer space, they start doing this big switch-up where everybody kind of switches positions. And then we get even Dream Girl.
Yep.
We even get Dream Girl trading places with Miss Delore, and she's on board, and Shagrek is doing his thing again, and she's like, oh my gosh, am I supposed to like this guy? Am I not supposed to like this guy? This wasn't part of the plan.
I would say no. And it gives us the wonderful thought balloon. Has Quanto seen something wrong with this wig I got from a female gambler and combed like Miss Delore's hair, ? That sentence is doing a lot of heavy lifting on the plot.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, it's
interesting.
But then they go back to Earth in Metropolis, and they con the gang into thinking that they are owed more money, so they have to go to the big boss. And the big boss, all in shadows, just like these secret organizations have, like on the Taurus gang. And then when they turn the lights on them, oh my gosh, RJ Brand is the leader of this gang?
What? No, it can't be. And then it must be some sort of lifelike rubber mask.
Scorpius gang shows up, and then they've beaten the crap out of all the bad guys, and they're trying to get a hold of RJ Brand. And when they pull off his rubber mask, and he says, I would have gotten away with it too if it hadn't been for you darn kids, we discover Zaltoris. Get it? His name is Zaltoris, and he's the leader of the Tauros gang. Little different spelling there. Tauros like the donut, and Taurus like the bull. But I was just waiting for Superboy to turn to the reader and said, I figured it out. Did you?
Did you? Yeah, and we do get, and this is actually kind of wonderful, we get a return engagement from the subs, who we haven't seen in like 25 issues. The subs
for like 3 panels.
In like 351.
Yeah.
But they come in and they save the day.
Because they're following the clues, not the gang, which is how the Legionnaires got into it.
I'm interested, though, at the fact that even under the Comics Code Authority, they got away with having an authority figure, the head of the science police, be a villain. That's the kind of thing that, you weren't supposed to be able to do. You weren't supposed to cast aspersions on whether or not, the police or authority figures were someone you could trust.
Well, but that's if they were legitimate authority figures. In this case, because Zaltoris is putting on RJ Brand's mask, Supergirl says, oh, I see. If I recall, you were appointed to this position on Brand's recommendation. I get it now, right? Like, you impersonating Brand went in and got yourself appointed to the head of the science police. So he's not a legitimate police officer. So I think in this case, the way they've written it out there, I think it kind of goes around that Comic Code Authority. And we also don't see in the Comic Code Authority, it's not supposed to be that you're not supposed to put police officers or people in authority in bad light. You're not supposed to show them doing criminal activities. And we really don't see him doing criminal activities here because he's having all of his underlings do it.
I suppose.
So, yeah, go ahead.
This issue also features an important first appearance.
Oh, yeah?
Leland McCauley.
Oh, yeah. There's this guy down on Millionaires Row, which apparently is where all the billionaires hang out, which I don't know why you'd call it Millionaires Row.
Well, if you line up millions enough, you get a billion.
Oh, okay.
You put your millions in a row. It makes sense.
Okay.
But Leland McCauley, who is shown as the second richest man in the universe, and never ever ever seems to give that up, because for the next 25 years Leland McCauley will be appearing as the guy who's really chafed to be the second richest man in the universe after RJ Brand, and will constantly be trying to mess with RJ Brand. Do you remember the Workforce from the Archie Legion?
Vaguely.
The Workforce was actually run by a Leland McCauley.
Ah, very cool. Something interesting to learn. We also find out that this lackey that is kind of like the liaison with the Legionnaires for the Scorpius gang, he's actually the leader of the Scorpius gang.
Yeah, and also they say Scorps a lot in this issue.
Yes.
And I want to shove a pen in my eye.
Well, I mean,
every time they say Scorps.
If there's something that would point to this being a shooter issue,
Scorps.
It's definitely the shortening of names, right? The Scorpius group becomes Scorps. Ultra Boy becomes U-Boy. So, I mean, just looking at that, you could say, oh yeah, that's definitely shooter stuff.
Elad and K-Kid are going to save the day.
I hate that with a passion.
Well, especially since they can't call anybody S-Boy because there's like 5 people.
Yeah.
Or M-Elad.
So here's another thing that I was curious about. Certainly we have the Scorpius gang, and we also have Taurus, and so we're getting kind of a Zodiac kind of setup here.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that Zodiac becomes this, even though we don't see the rest, and I'm guessing maybe down the line we might see some more Zodiac gangs. But this is also at the time when the Zodiac Killer is out and about. Jim Shooter is living at this time where the Zodiac Killer is going around in California, San Francisco, Northern California, although there's a lot of other, if you look at the suspected victims that the Zodiac Killer was involved with,
right.
There's about, I want to say maybe another dozen listed here. But that would be really weird if that's also an influence in this.
It's possible. Now, knowing what I do about Legion history, not only do we not see the other 10 gangs, we don't see either of these gangs again for a good 20 years.
We don't see these gangs again because they've been taken down and dismantled from the inside.
Oh, but have they?
I don't know. I think there's a lot of missed opportunities that we talk about with the Legion of Superheroes, Superboy Planet, the Nine Planets ice cream parlor. You know, those kinds of things they could have gone back to again and again and again. I really think that this Zodiac gang could have been a thing that they could have done. Each one controls one of the 12 sections of the galaxy or the universe or whatever scale that they're working on this week. And they're constantly at war trying to get more space. And they could have really created some really interesting Legion stories with this.
Yeah, I can see that. But I mean, at this point, they're really, especially at DC, just starting to put the concept of that ongoing continuity together. Mm-hmm. And it won't be for another few years before it really starts becoming the continuity that people really love and that eventually ruins all the fun in the 1990s. But yeah, I agree with you. I feel like, more of the Taurus gang, or maybe having set up in issue 370 something about, hey, did you hear about the Taurus gang? No, what about the Taurus gang? Oh, they're a gang called Taurus.
Yeah. So we already talked about the writing is very different in this issue. We also get a different artist in this issue.
Yep. Win Mortimer actually started last issue with the debut of the Tornado Twins, but I didn't realize until now that he's apparently the new regular Legion penciler. Right,
because what is Kurt Swan doing? He's over doing some more Superboy stuff, or is he retiring at this point?
Oh, Swan's not retired yet. I want to say he's on Action Comics now.
Okay.
In 68.
And that's going to be interesting because we're going to see, maybe Swan saw the writing on the wall or somebody mentioned to him, hey, Legion aren't going to be around in these adventure comics much longer. You might be wanting to you might want to look somewhere else for some regular art duties.
Could be.
But I got to say, this art is so very different, and coupled with the very different writing on this, I don't know. There's something about it to me that seemed fresh. There's something about it that seems very different. The hairstyles are different. The clothing is different. Supergirl looks totally different than what we've seen before. We're getting into that early 70s look for her.
Yep.
And I don't know. I really enjoyed the art in this issue, too.
I think Wynn has a softer sort of feel to his pencils than Kurt Swan. And everybody feels a little less, sharp-chinned and heavy-jawed. But it also feels like, I think, there's stronger facial expressions.
Yes, that's what I was going to say, too.
Especially in the female members. And you see this a lot throughout this issue with Dreamgirl. Yeah. Dreamgirl and Supergirl both have just an amazing depth of expression, especially when Dreamgirl is undercover and freaked out and gross. There's on page 17, there's a panel where she's kind of looking nervous over her shoulder.
Yeah, and you see Shadrach and Quanto.
Yeah, it's amazing. It looks like something out of a romance comic. Yeah. And I really kind of love it.
Yeah, the art is really good. And you're right. The softer features of the female characters and just a little bit more, the characters seem a little bit more fluid, a little bit more bendy than maybe what we've seen before. Yeah. I really kind of dig it. The other thing that we see is a villain becoming reformed. we see Quanto, who is at first doesn't want anything to do with Mystalore. But then when you've got somebody else in the position, he's like, there's something different about you, something better. Your aura is shining a little brighter. Huh. And then by the end of the issue, he's like, oh, wait, you're not Mystalore. And she's like, no, I'm sorry. And he's like, that's okay. I'm going to go find the real Mystalore, and I'm going to work with her to make her as good as you. Which, that's a little weird, too. But at the same time, there's this thing about, oh, no, I think that if she's could be reformed and be more like you, she could actually be a really good person.
Yeah. And then, of course, Dream Girl lets Quanto get away, which is a little less defensible. I mean, it feels that also feels like a bit of a romance novel plot or a romance comic plot. But I can kind of accept it because Quanto never feels evil throughout this issue. He just feels like he's misplaced.
Yeah. He even says it. He says, I'm just here by my masters from another dimension, and I'm just doing what I'm told. That's all.
Another dimension.
We mentioned the substitute heroes coming in, but is it weird that they really just show up for like the last 3 panels, and it just seems like this Deus Ex Machina where they just come out of nowhere and save the day?
That's kind of exactly what it is. And I think that the reason that happens is because we went to all the trouble of making sure that everybody was out of the running. So, 20 Legionnaires are off the board. Who's going to save the world? Who's going to save the day? Clearly, it's the subs. Got to be the subs.
Yeah. So you didn't like this issue, or you did like this issue?
I didn't like it as much as I had hoped I would. I feel like there's just, I don't know, something about it was off-putting to me.
Yeah, I
liked parts of the undercover stuff. I liked, the art. But I feel like the dialogue, Legion fools, did you really think we would allow you to go free? Now you will all die.
No, that's classic Bond villain stuff.
Nah, I felt like the dialogue was just way too heavy-handed, and it kind of meandered for me, but, I didn't hate it. It's a Legion story, so it's kind of okay.
I would really love to do some more research into this particular issue to find out if there was not a ghostwriter or something working on this.
If you enjoy the show, we would appreciate your support. You can find out more and become a Legion Clubhouse member at patreon.com/major spoilers.
What's going on in the letters page?
The letters page for Adventure Comics 374, apparently, and I'm not sure if this is where it entirely comes from, but somebody picked up on something that may or may not have been happening in the story, and the letter column suggests that Duo Damsel give up on Superboy and end up with the character that they believe to be his, polar opposite, not Polar Boy, but Bouncing Boy. And I'm thinking to myself, that is, that's the first time I've really seen it. We're starting to see much more romance and much more focus on the interpersonal stuff. But somebody all of a sudden was like, hey, Bouncing Boy and Duo Damsel, I don't think it's going to ruin anything for anybody to let you know that totally does happen.
Yeah. In fact, wasn't it when Superboy went to the future? Weren't they already married?
No, actually, they were not.
Oh, who was Chuck married to?
I don't remember Chuck actually appearing in that Future Legion story for very long. I want to say he had retired.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, that's right. He did retire.
Yep. But it's interesting to me to see, this may have come from Rand Lee of Roxbury, Connecticut, and become a key piece of Legion lore going forward.
Yep. It's going to be very interesting. There's another bit in the letters column that... Dear editor, in adventure number 368, Bobby Hitchman mentioned that the superheroes' costumes covered almost their whole bodies. I agree. Couldn't the heroines' costumes be a little more, a little less? A reader from Redmond, California, and the editor responds to, who are you thinking of? Saturn Girl? Take a look at Dream Girl, Shadow Lass, and Princess Projecta. If their outfits were much smaller, we might not get them past the comics code.
Yeah, a reader in Belmont, California, you should be ashamed of yourself, whoever and wherever you are.
Yeah, I read that because I'm now getting in the habit of reading the Legion Outpost, because there's all sorts of wacky stuff that you get in here. And because in another one, they're talking about the women's liberation movement. In another one, they're like, this is really good that you guys are discussing these things. And then suddenly it's just like, oh, Yeah. Yeah. And but hey,
you're doing that.
A reader is not wrong, because all we have to do is go forward another 10 years and we get Saturn Girl's new costume. That is
the pleather bikini. Yeah, that comes around, I think, in 1971 or 72.
Yeah, so I guess we're not too far away from that. And then certainly shortly afterwards, we start seeing a lot of super heroine costumes get a lot more revealing over the years.
And Shadow Lass ends up pretty much naked for the entirety of the 80s, 90s, and today.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. It's kind of sad. How would you have responded?
A reader, you should be ashamed of yourself. Love the editor. Actually, I would not have responded to that, because I think what they were going for was kind of a tongue-in-cheek funny thing, but it really did come across as a little creepy on both ends.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's the response that, in a modern context, you could get away with saying, hey, if you like the naked girls, we got 3 of them right over here.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I would have. I probably would not have run this letter unless they're getting a lot of letters like this.
Right.
I probably would have responded. I don't know how I would have responded. Something about, do you want to see your mother in less clothes? I don't know how. No, see, exactly. You shouldn't be looking at the women in this comic book as some kind of sexual desire that they should be wearing less clothing. I mean, you don't see them sitting there going, oh man, I need to see Chuck Tane in a Speedo, or I need to see Matter Eater Lad in, smaller clothes. I mean, can we get him a tank top and a pair of short shorts? No one is writing in for that kind of stuff. Why allow it for the female readers? And this could have been a good learning point to readers to say, hey, not appropriate, guys. Come on, be better.
Not okay.
Adventure Comics number 375, King of the Legion. Published December 1968. Written by Jim Shooter with art by Win Mortimer from Shooter Layouts. Who are the Wanderers?
Some weird structuring here in the way that we've done this show, Matthew, in that we try to cover as many of the issues as possible. Certainly we skipped over, or we will be skipping over, Superman 213. I think we've skipped over a Superboy issue that features the Legion briefly, or really not, a big thing that needs to be going on. But 375, we're suddenly dumped into a 2-part story again, which is going to be split up between this episode and the next episode.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Spoiler.
Yeah, no, it's great. But we also, this is the other cool thing about this issue. We get introduced to a new superhero team that we've never met before. This is, I want to say they only appeared like 2 or 3 times during this time period, and then get rebooted as a standalone series in the
20
80s.
Years later. Yeah,
in the 80s or 90s. I want to see here.
1987.
1987 is when they came back.
Yep, after the Crisis on Infinite Earths.
So why don't we talk about the Wanderers?
Oh, they're the hero team whose names are really bad.
I mean, the issue opens up with these 2 lines of heroes. Well, the heroes and then some unknown people we've never seen before. And they've got guns and swords, and they look kind of dangerous, and they're all approaching one another, crossing the Axis line and really causing some left-right confusion for the reader until they finally approach the team. And they're just like, I hold out my sword in friendship. And then we are introduced to Celebrand, Psyche, Quantum Queen, Elvo. Psyche. You say Psyche?
Yeah, I say Psyche.
Elvo, Dartlig. No. Dartalg.
It's not a word that makes sense in English.
Yeah,
Dartalg.
Yeah. Orinoco Flow and Immorto.
Ornitho.
Oh, Orinoco Flow, sure.
Like ornithology.
Yeah, because he can turn into a bird, kind of like Hawkman, but he doesn't turn into a bird.
You know what's fascinating, though, is we see this setup, and Celebrand, who for this episode is played by Will Ferrell in his bald gym teacher makeup.
Yeah.
Says, tell us about your powers. And Ornitho says, I have the power to turn into any other bird. And the rest of the team just like, hey, yeah, cool. And then we just cut away. We show this team of 6 people, and they're like, here we are, we're 6 people. And then one of them introduces himself, and we're like, oh, out of time. It's frustrating, dude.
Yeah. I can't help but notice there's a lot of X-Men stuff going on in this book, too. You ever notice that the Wanderer ship looks a lot like, especially as it's flying through this nebula of gas, that it looks like the X-Men's Blackwing, whatever their ship is called?
Well, the X-Men would not have the Blackbird until like 1971 or 72.
I know, but man.
Yeah. And what's really fascinating to me is we start this story and they're like, here are these wanderers and they're cool, great superheroes. We're like, okay, 2 of them introduce themselves. Then we're immediately into the plot and we don't even find out their names until like halfway through the issue.
Yeah. When suddenly, because they find out that after they've gone through this nebula gas,
they're evil.
They turn evil for up to 2 weeks. And so in 2 weeks, these superheroes could do anything. And so they have to be stopped. But before they can do that, there's some giant floaty hand that appears out of nowhere, scrubbing on the manganium.
It's actually the Infinity Gauntlet. I'm almost sure of it. And
it really looks like it.
And it scrapes out a message that says, I challenge the mightiest Legionnaire to combat in a tourney of worlds on the last planet, which begs 3 important questions.
Okay, who's the mightiest Legionnaire?
Right. What in the world is the last planet? And
maybe?
How exactly did Thanos get to the DC universe to write this message in the first place with his Infinity Gauntlet?
You know, there's a lot of secret crossovers that happen between Marvel and DC.
That's true. I don't think this is one. But it's an interesting point nonetheless. And it leads the Legionnaires to a very teenage moment where they're all like, oh, well, clearly the mightiest among us must go. And they're all like, yep, I'm on my way.
Including like, Element Lad.
Element Lad. Well, Element Lad's got a legitimate...
I guess I can...
Okay, you walk up to Element Lad and he's in a bad mood and he turns you into a gas and you are gone. It's not Element Lad that's the problem. It's Bouncing Boy being part of this tournament to discern the mightiest Legionnaire. That's the issue. And, of course, Chemical King and Timberwolf have to leap in to remind us that, hey, we're part of the team now.
Yeah, we're around. Don't forget us.
Yeah, but unfortunately, before they can do that, they're interrupted by the new chief of the science police, Burt Reynolds.
No, I was going to say, what's his name? Butkus. Dick Butkus.
Dick Butkus, yeah. He's definitely Burt Reynolds, though. He's got the Burt Reynolds mustache.
No, Burt Reynolds has a much better mustache than that. But this guy definitely...
Got his sunglasses on, and he's like, the Wanderers have stolen the 7 stones of Galactus. And that's my
but he
Burt
does.
Reynolds.
Oh, yeah, you got to work on that one.
Well, I'm no Norm Macdonald.
There you go.
But
it's interesting, too, that Supergirl, when they're like, okay, we're going to do a competition where we're going to find out who's the best. And Supergirl's like, I'm not going to participate because I don't want to see my Brainiac get hurt.
Right. I'd have to compete against my Brainiac. And that's not the only ship tease in this issue, because we also see
Saturn Girl talking to Lightning Lad, but then we see Light Lass worried about Timberwolf and Shadow Lass for the first time evincing an interest in the whereabouts and well-wishing of Mon-El. Yeah.
And Mon-El and Shadow Lass and Timberwolf and Light Lass become long-lasting Legion romances down the line.
Mm-hmm.
But before all of that,
we see any of the guys going, oh man, I really don't want to punch, Light Lass in the face.
Well, there's only one woman in this
it's
ridiculous round-robin tournament, and that's Saturn Girl.
Oh, yeah. Cue the Karate Kid music montage here.
Da-da-da, da-da.
Sweep the leg.
Can I just
sweep the leg, Chuck? Sweep the leg.
Put him in a trans suit. Never mind. We'll get to that. That's a few issues down the line. Can I just say that the brackets for this tournament make 0 sense at all?
Okay, so we got Karate Kid, Ultra Boy, and Sun Boy taking on Quantum Queen.
Right.
Chemical King, Saturn Girl, and Chameleon Boy taking on Orantho, Orinoco Flow. Superboy, Brainiac 5, and Timberwolf taking on Immorto Jones, or Immorto Joe. And Bouncing Boy, Mon-El, and Element Lad taking on Dartlet.
Dartalg. And then whoever wins those 3-on-1 matches will then go on to fight Psyche or Elvo. And I'm like, this is so unfair to the Wanderers. I mean, this is literally a 3-on-1 battle. This is not fair.
It's even more dumb because not only, well, it doesn't really go 3-on-1. It goes 3-on-1, then 2-on-1, and then 1-on-1.
Yeah, but it also gives us the wonderful moment of Element Lad and Mon-El finding Dartalg and immediately trying to kill each other.
Which is dumb.
Mon literally draws back his invulnerable, super strong fist to punch Jan in the face. And I'm like, you're going to return. Literally, you would render his face into a fine red mist. But fortunately, Element Lad, whose powers now come from his eyes, which that's new. But anyway, Element Lad uses his newfound element eye beams to poison Mon-El.
I know they're horrible to one another. And meanwhile, what's his name? It's Darthog.
Darthog
comes out and he's like, oh, I'm going to take these guys down with my poison darts. Oh, wait, there's a fatty. He's all blown up like a balloon. I'll just use my weakest dart and pop him like a balloon.
At which point, the dart just wedges in Chuck's tummy and he punches Darthog in a face.
And says, hey, this isn't just all flab. It's all muscle. Muscle under it. Don't you forget it.
Yeah, it's PVC. But it is interesting to note that even here, they're having to go to great lengths to take everyone else out of the running in order for this story to take Bouncing Boy seriously.
Mm-hmm. Well, and again, that happens again and again and again. Every team ends up fighting with each other, no matter who they're going after. And in some cases, it's just a stupid mistake. Like Brainiac's like, oh, I forgot that Evolvo, if he, or Evil, or whenever he kills, dies, he comes right back to life. So, of course, the guy should have jumped off the building to his death because he would have escaped. But, Superboy and puts a stop to that.
Yeah.
But once they just keep going after each other. And I just find that not very becoming of Legionnaires.
No.
But very something I would expect. But something that I would expect from a Jim Shooter story, I guess. And that's why when I'm comparing the previous issue with this one, totally different.
Yeah, there's a lot of idiot ball holding. And, I have to say it, Shooter loves Karate Kid.
So much so that he's not even used in this issue.
Yeah, he is. Karate Kid punches out Ultra Boy.
Oh, that's right. Right.
Punches out Sun Boy, nearly kills 2 of his comrades, and then beats the snot out of Quantum Queen, who, by the way, she is the only Wanderer we've ever seen before.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, Quantum Queen was one of the dead heroes in the Hall of Fallen Legionnaires way back in the Adult Legion story in Adventure 354.
Interesting.
Yeah, so she makes a 3-panel appearance here and gets jacked in the face by Karate Kid, who is just
you're thinking of Nightman or whatever the guy with the sword is.
No.
Yeah, Quantum because it's Chuck that takes out Quantum Queen.
No, not in the first round. Chuck takes out Psyche.
Oh, okay. All right.
Quantum Queen, paradoxically, has a W on her shirt.
See, that's why it's also confusing.
Yeah, it is kind of confusing.
In the end, though, we get down to, is it Superboy and Chuck, Bouncing Boy, going after the leader. And he's got these stones that they've stolen. And put together, he can see the past, present, or future. And he's like, well, let me just see how this fight ends. And he's like, oh, no, I'm going to be captured by Superboy. All right, I'll just go out the back door and surrender to Bouncing Boy. Mm-hmm. And so Bouncing Boy becomes the most powerful Legion member in the world.
Forcing the others to rip off their chest symbols.
For no reason.
In humiliation.
No reason.
It's humiliation.
No, you don't do that.
Well, here's the thing. In the 1960s, the stories were often written backwards. So I will
there's a
guarantee
cover.
you that the cover, the image of Bouncing Boy forcing his partners to rip off their cymbals was given to Neil Adams to draw. And then they said to Shooter, write a story around this mess. Also worth noting, when they're ripping off their chest cymbals, everybody's shirt rips open except for Saturn Girls. I'm not saying that it should have. I'm just saying it's noticeable.
Yeah, let's go back to that middle segment there, Matthew, where we talk about
I didn't say
costumes
I
revealing
it.
less is more.
I didn't say I wanted it to. I just said that the way it's drawn, it's really obvious.
Have you heard? Let me ask you this: have you heard stories? Because what happens? Chuck is whisked away, and we have to come back next issue to find out what happens next episode for you listeners. But have you heard these stories? I mean, we've kind of talked about Weisinger as kind of not a nice person, tyrant.
Yeah.
Have you heard stories that like Shooter was legitimately given psychological conditions because of Weisinger? That he would berate this kid so much that he would have like nervous fits and stuff, and then turn around and pray and, brag to everyone else about, hey, I got this kid that's writing great comics, but then call Shooter up on a Saturday night or something and just berate him to the point where he had like, I don't know if it was social anxiety or if it was like nervousness talking to people because Weisinger would just berate him like that. Have you heard any of those stories?
I have heard Jim Shooter refer obliquely to Weisinger as, and I'm quoting, mean as a snake at the best of times.
Yeah.
But I had not heard anything specifically about, Mort screaming him into, that doesn't necessarily mean that it didn't happen. I mean, can you imagine though, being a teenager
being 16-year-olds and having this old man call you up and yell at you
and berate you and just freak out? Yeah, that would be problematic.
Yeah. I would point everybody, Jim Shooter does have a website, jimshooter.com. And he will often reflect on a lot of his time writing comics, especially in the early days. And he does say in one of the posts called Regrets, he does talk about Mort is, what did you say, a snake on the best of days?
Mean as a snake on the best of days. Yeah.
I just was listening to an interview somewhere where someone was talking about how Mort was that way and really kind of gave Shooter a condition, which is just horrible.
Well, and when you think about it, if you look at, not necessarily defending any of his positions either, but if you look at what Mort was responsible for, I mean, Mort was the editor over the Superman titles. So a perception that you had to be a complete jerk because you're at the top of your profession, because you're handling Superman. At the time, Superman would have been, the top seller, the top thing. I don't know. I mean, Mort Weisinger was always referred to, I know, as a micromanager.
Yeah.
And I know that he's always referred to as, overbearing. And I have heard stories about him, bad-mouthing people and then turning around and saying, yeah, they're doing really great work, just don't tell them about it. But
yeah. Let me read from this quote. And so this is a quote from jimshooter.com under the regret section. I got to the point where anytime I'd hear a phone ring, I'd clench up, white-knuckled, very Pavlovian. Even in school or some other place that was ostensibly safe, a ringing phone jolted me. Mort used to tell me I was his quote-unquote charity case. He said that the only reason he kept me on was because my family would starve otherwise. By the way, Mort did call me at school once. They sent somebody down from the principal's office to bring me to the phone. Some question about a cover design, ... The net effect of Mort's honking at me was slowing me down. I'd sit there for hours immobilized, useless, unproductive, because I was sure that anything I put on paper would be wrong, and therefore Mort would scream at me. My mother would occasionally plead with me. She'd say, we really need a check. I started working in my room, sitting on my bed to keep my lack of production more private. Every once in a while, she'd come upstairs and look at the blank page on my lap board and start crying. That was tough. She meant no harm, but it was tough. At some point, my fear of delivering work that Mort would rip me to shreds over was eclipsed by the fear of failing to deliver or delivering late, which would be worse. Then the stuff would flow. I could go like the wind. That's horrible.
Yeah, that is rough, man.
Of course, I don't think anyone would be hiring a 15, 16-year-old today to write their comics.
See, and that's the thing. I mean, on the one hand, you have to look at why did he put this much effort into this kid? I mean, was he really trying to bring him up and have him, be his protege? Or was it just that he could pay him a lot less than someone who was an established professional writer? There's a lot of questions you have to ask here, and I don't know that there are any answers.
I would say it's partially probably could pay him less. Also because, hey, here's a kid that's hip with the other kids. And what was it, up until an issue or so ago, the Legion continued to climb as far as success goes. So this was like a 1-2 combination. This would be the equivalent of having a Brian Michael Bendis come to your team to write Superman, right? It's just like, this is a win-win for us. And I think that's probably why Mort put up with it. And also probably because he could pay the kid a little bit more. And it was probably somebody who wouldn't push back, because it sounds like in this little bit that I read at jimshooter.com, that he would not push back. But I think that there were some other creators that Mort would work with that would give him the business back. Well, that just about wraps it up for another episode of the Legion Clubhouse. Matthew, what did we learn this week?
We learned that under the pen of Win Mortimer, Bouncing Boy looks remarkably like Ed McMahon.
I think we also learned that Mort Weisinger, man, not a nice guy.
Yeah, and we learned that Eastbound and Down, Loaded Up and Truckin', the Bandit is immortal and is now a space cop.
That wraps it up for this installment of the Legion Clubhouse. Thank you, everyone, for downloading and checking us out. If you have any questions, just drop us an email, podcast@majorspoilers.com. I certainly appreciate those of you who are Legion fans tweeting at me after you hear a show saying, oh, you guys didn't mention this, or oh, you should have mentioned that. Certainly appreciate that stuff. I can remember it more and longer if you will send me an email at podcast@majorspoilers.com, because my Twitter timeline just fills right up, and it's going to get lost before we sit down and record another issue. But I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for sending those thoughts, ideas, suggestions, corrections, and the et ceteras. Love the et ceteras. All right, Matthew, until next time when the Legion Clubhouse meets once again, I am Boy Lad Kingman.
And I'm Amy Man.
The Legion Clubhouse is a production of Major Spoilers Entertainment, LLC, and is produced by Steven Schleicher. Your hosts were Matthew Peterson and Steven Schleicher. You can follow Matthew at Mighty King Cobra and Steven at Major Spoilers. You can follow this podcast on Twitter at Legion Clubhouse. If you have questions or comments, send them to podcast@majorspoilers.com. I'm Jason Inman. Until next time, eat it, Grandpa.
This podcast is copyright 2019 by Major Spoilers Entertainment, LLC.